Hush it. We're the talk of the town, pretty girls. I have hit yet another psychological jackpot with Paris Milan. I haven't even watched more than 5 minutes of her commentary on this beautiful, exotical, and I've already got 20 minutes worth of content. Welcome to another episode of Comment, Foolery, Exposed. This girl, who I've never heard of until 5 minutes ago, I actually have never heard of her until Paris Milan's video was sent to me by you guys. So apparently this girl is a gymnast of some sort, and like I said, I've never heard of her, and now she has a new fan, which is me. I will be adding her to my stock library. We'll be doing more videos about her, but apparently this girl is one of these, quote, average or below average women, and she, quote, can't compete with non-black Hispanic baddies. Let's get into it. Also, I just want to point out that this girl is 23 years old. That's literally like college age, or you just graduated from college. Imagine being a grown woman pulling up pictures of a college age girl and talking about her looks and how pretty she is or how pretty she's not, and then saying that she can't compare to someone with less blackness than her. If I pulled up pictures of a young, unambiguous black girl and started comparing her beauty to other women's beauty, or saying how basically she's beneath them, my whole channel would be gone. But let's go ahead and get into it. Have you ever noticed that when unambiguous black women are attempting to humble a mixed race woman, they will make a comment like, oh, your white side won't accept you. Non-black people won't accept you. And it's like, okay, if non-black people won't accept a mixed black woman, what makes you think that they're going to accept an unambiguous black woman? Do you see how that destroys the divestment talking point right there? So it's like a lot of unambiguous black women online, they can't even stick to a talking point. Because if the humbling tactic you're using against exoticals is that non-black people won't F with you, then guess what? Non-black people definitely won't F with you with your unambiguous self. Can't I say the same talking point right back to you? Another talking point that I've seen unambiguous women use is, oh, exoticals will talk about the things they've experienced with black women being mean to them, but they won't talk about the racism that non-black people have given towards them. Once again, right back at you. You talk about light-skinned people being colorists. You talk about black men being colorists, but you have no smoke for the creators of colorism, texturism, featureism, and anti-blackness. And that is who? The white community. You guys have no smoke for them. In fact, you guys will come online and brag about your light-skinned boyfriend, like Rashida Strober. You'll come online and talk about talking to a white guy and a Hispanic guy like Chrissy. You'll come online and talk about how you're so desirable in the eyes of white men, and how white men, they think that dark-skinned black women are more exotic. So where's all of the smoke for white people? Why is the smoke constantly for mixed race women, or potentially even the black community, black men? So I can make the exact same argument. Oh, well, the exoticals, they're only talking about their experiences within the black community. When it comes to this channel is actually blackness centered, but even if you look at the trends online, most of the black women, they don't talk about any of the racism that they experience even within these divested relationships. So you're telling me that non-black people won't accept a mixed black woman, but I'm supposed to believe that they're suddenly going to accept an unambiguous black woman? And I'm supposed to believe that suddenly the non-black community prefers an unambiguous black woman? Also, you know how people will say, oh, exoticals, they're male identified, or they're black male identified. A lot of the content creators that those same black women are watching, those women are with black men. Those women still date black men. Cynthia G dates black men. She has said this on her channel before. Paris Milan, if I'm not mistaken, is with a black man. I Am Aloho, if I'm not mistaken, is with a black man. So do you give the same talking points to them? Like, is the same smoke being thrown at those content creators? Because I find it funny how whenever someone thinks that you're a preference to a black man, they love to randomly bring up, oh, well, you're only preferred by black men, or you're black male identified. And it's like, why does everything have to randomly be about men? Why are you randomly bringing up men? Why are you randomly bringing up that non-black people won't accept you, as if that's supposed to be a humbling tactic? We don't have a white-centered identity. Not everyone centers their confidence around white people accepting them or around men accepting them. So I've noticed that there's this overarching theme when it comes to colorism content creators, where it always ties back to what do white people think of me and then what do men think of me. Oh, okay, I have confidence now because these white men like Cohen Nanik, they say that they prefer unambiguous black women. So now my self-esteem has been raised because this white man prefers me. Oh, I feel better about myself now because I saw this mixed woman get cheated on and abused, and now I feel better about myself because she got treated like me. She got treated like a black woman. Have you ever noticed whenever they use that talking point, you got the same treatment? The same treatment as who? As a black woman? Oh, okay, so you're admitting that you think that black women are at the bottom. So you're admitting that you believe that black women are the standard for struggle treatment. You're admitting that you believe that black women get treated the worst in dating scenarios. And do you see how, once again, always tying back to dating, always tying back to relationships, always tying back to who's prettier in the eyes of men? And another talking point I've noticed is people will say things like, oh, this mixed race woman, she can't compete with somebody who's more white than her. She can't compete with someone who's lighter than her. Like they'll say this to dark skinned exoticals. She can't compete with someone who's light skinned. Compete for what? What's the prize that we're competing for, sis? Oh, what? Men? Oh, okay, so you're male centered. You think men are the prize. You think that white men are the prize. You think that the male gaze is the prize. I've also noticed a lot of hypocrisy when it comes to the colorism conversation, or kind of like women talking about their memories of being bullied and stuff. So, unambiguous black women, they can come online, they can talk about how they were bullied in kindergarten, the light skinned girl got asked to prom or whatever, and nobody has a problem with it, myself included. You have the right to freedom of speech. But suddenly, when the exoticals talk about what's happened to us, then people want to say, oh, well, why are you talking about something that happened in fifth grade? That was so long ago. Oh, just get over it. And I've noticed that there is this fear that some black women have had where they're afraid of looking bad in the public eye because, once again, a lot of times their identity is centered around whiteness, centered around what white people think, centered around what men think. I've actually had black women come on here and get mad at my story time series where you guys write in and then we talk about what has happened to us. And people get mad because they say that, hey, there are white people who watch your channel, Exoticals United. So, like, don't talk about the bad things that black women have done. And I'm like, wait a minute. Your identity is not centered around white people. Any white person that stereotypes billions of unambiguous black women based on a YouTube story time, they were already anti-black from the beginning. So me not speaking out, that actually doesn't solve your problems. Have you ever noticed that when you ask unambiguous black women, what are the solutions to colorism, texturism, and featureism? They never offer a solution. Or the solution to like overcome it would be complimenting them, kind of giving pity compliments. I almost feel like in some cases, some of these content creators are saying stuff as a way to fish for compliments. Or sometimes I've noticed this leveling tactic where you're hoping to tear down an exotical in hopes that unambiguous black women will feel like they're on the same level as her. But that obviously doesn't work. We know from a psychology standpoint that that doesn't work. Tearing someone else down, it's not going to build your self-esteem. And I've also noticed that one thing that people will say to exoticals is they'll say, why don't you guys talk about all of the negative things that have happened to you? Why don't you guys make channels talking about bad stuff? And it's like, well, we do talk about bad things that have happened to us. You just don't like who the antagonist is in the story. You're just mad because you can relate to the antagonist. Like in the case of Chrissy, for example, or other colorism content creators, I actually have no problem with them coming online and saying, hey, a mixed woman did this, a light-skinned woman did that. I want Chrissy to actually release her content where she was talking so much shit about all the negative things light-skinned women have done. I have no problem with people doing that. So why is it that you get to speak and then if somebody else responds, then that's when there's a problem? And then the comeback is, well, white people don't accept you. Non-black women don't want to be your friend. And it's like, well, sis, can't I say the same thing about you? Guess what? Then the job market doesn't accept you then. If you want to make the talking point that non-black people don't accept anybody who has blackness, then I could say the same thing about you. Then the job market won't accept you. Then Hollywood won't accept you. Then the white men you're trying to divest to won't accept you. So you're actually dissing yourself. Do you see how they're using blackness as a humbling tactic? Constantly using blackness against you. Constantly using the blackness of an exotical against her, not realizing that they're dissing themselves. Another humbling tactic I've noticed is people will say, well, you don't look mixed, as if it's bad to look black. And it's like, well, yeah, I look like a beautiful black woman. Now what? How you like them apples? Like saying that somebody looks black, that's not a diss. If anything, that's a compliment. You're actually increasing her beauty. You're telling me that she actually looks like a beautiful black woman. So that's not the diss that you think it is, hun. And if you think that it's a diss to look black, then that tells me what you think of yourself because you're unambiguously dark skinned with 4C hair. So if you're telling an exotical that she doesn't look mixed, she can't compete with people who are more white than her or more ambiguous than her, then it's like, okay, so sis, you're admitting that you can't compete with me then. You're saying that you're beneath me then due to your own blackness. So do you see how some people, they try so hard to drag down your confidence because they want your confidence level and your self-esteem to be as low as theirs? And also, once again, this whole talking point of you can't compete with somebody who's more ambiguous. Compete for what? Compete for who? Oh, compete for men? Oh, okay, so that's what this whole thing is about then. You care about how an exotical is viewed in the eyes of men. Yet you have the audacity to call exoticals male centered. So, do you see how their talking points just go in circles? Another thing that I've noticed is the terminology ambiguous. People will say things like, you can't compete with someone more ambiguous than you. Have you ever noticed that a lot of black women's standard for ambiguity is whiteness? They'll say, oh, well, Jenna Frooms is more ambiguous. No, you mean more white. Jenna Frooms looks more phenotypically white than someone like Chile from TLC, for example. So, in my opinion, Chile from TLC is still ambiguous. The only difference is that Chile from TLC does not look like a white girl. So, do you see how, once again, there's this white-centered identity. There's this male-centered confidence. A lot of women who try to insult you, they're exposing where they get their confidence from. They're exposing where they get their self-esteem from. So always pay attention to how a woman insults you because it's going to tell you what she values. If she says you can't compete, what she's saying is, my confidence comes from competing with women like you. My confidence comes from competing with other women for the prize. And all you have to do is think to yourself, okay, what is the prize? She's saying that you can't compete for what? Oh, okay, you can't compete for acceptance by white people. Okay, so you think that the prize is acceptance by white people. That's why you're using her being ostracized by white people as a humbling tactic. We don't have whiteness-centered identities over here. We don't have male-centered identities. Competing for social acceptance in the white community, that's not a competition. And also, like I said, if mixed race people aren't accepted by white people, then what is your unambiguous self accepted by then? And by the way, I forgot to mention that the YouTuber I'm talking about is Paris Milan. I noticed a clip that one of you guys sent me of a video that she created where she was talking about some girl who's an athlete who I've actually never even heard of until today. But do you see how YouTubers like Paris Milan are actually contributing to popularizing exoticals? Because if you look at Paris, she actually has 348,000 subscribers. So now Jordan Chiles is getting exposure, and now she has a new fan, me. But she's getting exposure in front of hundreds of thousands of people. So do you see what I mean about bad social climbing tactics? So I'm not quite sure what their goal is over there. I'm not quite sure if their goal is to empower unambiguous women. But I can tell you, as a person that studies sociology and psychology, the way that you empower unambiguous women is not by talking shit about women like Jordan Chiles. Another thing that I heard Paris Milan say is that Jordan Chiles would never be able to compete with, quote, baddie non-black Hispanic women. So that exposes the fact that Paris Milan's beauty standard is actually non-blackness because she's saying you can't compete in terms of beauty. She's saying that the non-black Hispanic women are going to be perceived as more beautiful as her. Okay, so my question for you, Paris Milan, is if you consider beauty to be on a scale of whoever's closest to white is the prettiest, where does that put you on the beauty scale? If you're saying that this girl's blackness puts her beneath non-black Hispanic women, then where does that place you? Do you see how they expose themselves every single time? And also, I've noticed that A lot of unambiguous women have no problem coming on YouTube and ranking exoticals in terms of beauty. But if I were to ever come on my YouTube channel and say, oh, let's rank Francesca Rivers compared to Beyonce, and then if I were to say, oh, let's put Francesca Rivers at the bottom, I would be called all types of colorist, featurist, texturist, and anti-black. So do you see how unambiguous black women like Paris Milan, they can make these anti-black statements and people don't notice it because it's coming from an unambiguous black woman. But if you repeat that same rhetoric and say something like, oh, well, you can't compete with me then, because you're unambiguously black and I am more ambiguous than you. If you were to repeat that, you'd be called a texturist, colorist, and featurist. So do you see how these content creators will actually use anti-blackness against mixed women? So they're not going to use it against an unambiguous woman because that's a woman who has her own image. But anytime they're trying to humble an exotical, they will try to humble you using your blackness. And of course, the humbling tactic is based on who gets the most social acceptance by the white man, because that's the prize in Paris Milan's eyes, because she said it. She said, you can't compete with the non-black Hispanic women. Compete for what? Compete for what prize? What's the prize? Is it white acceptance? Is the prize the male gaze? Because that tells me what you view as the prize. Another thing I noticed is Paris Milan said, oh, these biracials have a long memory, like, they can remember the bad things that happened to them and kind of talk about their traumas. And it's like, okay, so this is exactly why I am no longer caping for women who won't cape for me. Because when it comes to exoticals, all of us used to be subscribers. Well, I'm actually still a subscriber to all of these women, by the way. I still subscribe to Paris Milan and everybody. But all of us have spent years listening to unambiguous women talk about their long memories and their, the things that happened to them, but then we're not receiving that same energy. So I am not going to cape for women who do not reciprocate. I am not going to listen to women who do not listen to me. So it's like, if you're not going to respect the experiences or the memories or even have empathy for the traumas of exoticals, why should I turn around and have empathy for you? Another thing I noticed was they were pulling up pictures of Jordan Chiles' parents. So it's like, imagine having a YouTube channel where you're supposed to be kind of empowering unambiguous black women. And instead of that, you're ranking an exotical's beauty. You're comparing her to how beautiful non-black Hispanic women are. And then you're pulling up pictures of an exotical's parents. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say bad social climbing tactics. Imagine wanting to build a community that is centered around empowering unambiguous women, and you're spending your time focusing on what this woman looks like. How pretty is she compared to others? So do you see what I'm talking about? Do you see how you could literally be minding your business? I didn't even know who this girl was until like a few minutes ago when I started recording this video. And imagine just existing as an exotical, and you've got women behind the scenes literally pulling up your picture, comparing your beauty to somebody else's. And I'm sure that this has actually happened to some of you exoticals in real life. Have you ever had that happen to you? Where people will be stalking your Instagram pictures. They'll be pulling up pictures of you behind the scenes. They'll be talking about your beauty and like you don't even know that they're talking about it. This is actually a sign of pedestalization. This is a sign of admiration. And I've also noticed this talking point of, oh, if you're an exotical, your head has been gassed up by the black community. Like, you're not as pretty as you think you are. That talking point. So have you ever noticed that anytime someone calls you not pretty, they never tell you what their internalized beauty standard is? So it's like, okay, let's say that this girl is quote unquote ugly or she's below average. Okay, so what is your beauty standard? Please tell me who you're comparing her to. Who is a drop dead gorgeous woman who is prettier than her within her phenotype range? Name 25 exoticals that you believe are the beauty standard for exoticals. I would love to see that. Have you ever noticed that whenever these content creators come online and they try to call an exotical ugly, they never tell you what they consider to be pretty and what they consider to be ugly? Also, Paris Milan, point to the facial features, point to the hair texture on this woman that is below average. Point to what makes her below average. Is it her eyes, nose, lips, skin tone, body shape, hair texture? Tell me, Paris, what is it that makes her below average? What is it that makes her pale in comparison to non-black Hispanic women? I would love to have an answer to that. So have you ever noticed that they'll go silent once you ask them to point out exactly what it is that makes you below average? And this is how I know a lot of it is just disingenuous. A lot of it is women not wanting you to have a sense of confidence. And so they will pull things out of the air. Oh, well, you're below average. Oh, well, you don't compare to these other people. Oh, well, you can't compete. Compete for what? I don't compare to who? Because last time I checked, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So if this girl thinks that she is cute, guess what? Her beauty standard within herself, she gets to decide that. She gets to decide whether she thinks that she's cute. So anything that another woman has to say is just an opinion. But since you brought up your opinion, I would love to know, what exactly is it that makes her below average? What exact features? What features are taking away from her beauty? Eye shape, nose shape, lips, skin tone, hair texture? Which parent is the ugly parent that gave her these below average features? Which one is it? Because you said that non-black Hispanic women, that she can't compete with those baddies. Okay, so I see that her mother appears to be the kind of ambiguous one. Not quite sure what her mixture is, but her mother appears to be kind of more non-black looking. So where did she get her below average features from, Paris Milan? Which parent gave her the below average features? Which parent does she look more like? Another talking point that I find hilarious is when people say, oh, exoticals are raised to think that they're better. So suddenly, because someone is an exotical and in your eyes they benefit from an ism, colorism, texturism, or featurism, because you see that they could potentially benefit from an ism, you automatically think that their parents have raised them from birth to think that they are better than you. And so I find it interesting how suddenly you get to speak for this woman's parents. And a lot of people will tell me, they'll be like, oh, you can't speak on a community that you're not a part of. You can't speak on an experience that you don't have. Okay, well, guess what? I'm going to keep the same energy. Why is Paris Milan speaking on a community that she's not a part of? She's not a part of the non-black community. She's not a part of the Hispanic community. She's not a part of the white community. She's not a part of the mixed community. So why is it that unambiguous content creators can speak on whatever communities they want, but suddenly when the exoticals say something back, you can't handle that smoke? Also, I find it hilarious how there's this stereotype that if you are mixed race, then your parents must be racist, especially if you have a black father. Your parents must be racist. Your dad must be self-hating because black men are self-hating. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. So you're telling me that women like Paris Milan or I Am Aloho, they're with black men. So are there black men? Are they self-hating? So what makes a person self-hating? Is it being black that makes them self-hating? Because if blackness makes you self-hating, well, Paris Milan, you're unambiguously black. So do you see how the talking point just falls apart right there? And also, you know what? Let's pretend that this girl's parents are racist, okay? Let's pretend that this girl is a colorist, texturist, featurist, and that her parents raised her to think she's better. Let's pretend that this girl does think that she's better than unambiguous black women. Okay, now what? Now what? So she thinks she's better than you. Okay, now what? Are you mad? Because being angry at somebody who thinks they're better than you, I just want to know, how does that help your self-esteem? How does that help your mental health? Because guess what? There's always going to be somebody who thinks they're better than you. Just like how a lot of unambiguous women try to say that they think they're better than maybe a mixed woman or a white woman, or they'll say, oh, I'm the blueprint, I have the Eve gene, I have the best body, or whatever. So you're technically saying you think your body's better, you think your genes are better. Okay, cool. So even if she does think she's better, why do you care about who thinks they're better than you? So do you see what I mean? It's this pondering of, she's light skinned, she has curly hair. Does she think she's better than me? Let me pull up a picture of her parents. I wonder what her parents taught her. Her parents probably taught her that she's better. And it's like, the projection is insane. And also, the assumption that the Hispanic community or the white community, the assumption that like any non-black parent or non-black person automatically thinks they're better, you're also stereotyping non-black people because you're saying that non-black people think they're better than black people. Okay, so then once again, that crushes the whole divestment talking point then. Because why should unambiguous women get with these white men? These white men are going to think they're better, right? By that logic, you shouldn't get with a white man. So interracial marriages shouldn't exist. Do you see how badly the talking points fall apart? And I noticed another hilarious talking point, which is the "you're still black" talking point, as if that's bad, as if it's bad to be seen as black or perceived as black. Not every mixed race person hates their blackness like how a lot of unambiguous people do. So, for example, even with myself, if people perceive me as just being black and they feel like I only look black, I don't have a problem with that because I personally think blackness is beautiful. So saying that I look black, that's actually a compliment. Saying that I'm perceived as black is a compliment. So Paris Milan, you said in your live stream, hey, this girl, she can't compete with non-black Hispanic women, and then you just said she looks black and she will be one dropped into blackness. Okay, so you just admitted out of your own mouth that blackness is beneath non-blackness in terms of beauty, and that black looking people would be seen as less beautiful than non-black looking people. So you just gave an anti-black talking point in your own live stream. And you tried to diss a mixed race black woman, but you ended up dissing unambiguous blackness. Telling a mixed person they look black is not an insult. And also, you said that she looks average or below average, and then you said she looks black. Okay, so then that means you think that blackness looks average or below average. You sound just like the Mademoiselle, who said the same thing about Sydney Black, who is an unambiguous black woman with blue eyes, and the Mademoiselle said that Sydney Black looks like a regular black woman if it weren't for her blue eyes. You just did the same exact thing by saying that she looks black and she's also average or below average. So the jokes literally write themselves. So do you see how there's this inherent stereotype that, oh, it must be the mixed race black people who are colorist, featurist, and texturist and anti-black, but then you've got unambiguous black people making disses against mixed people based on their blackness, saying things like, oh, well, you look average, you look black. It's like, wait a minute, so you think blackness looks average? So you think blackness is below Hispanic women? And also, when it comes to the whole conversation of how you are identified, guess what? I can't control how other people identify me. I can't control how other people stereotype me. So if somebody identifies me as black, can't control that. If someone identifies me as Hispanic, can't control that. If someone identifies me as biracial, mixed race, multi-generationally mixed, light skin, dark skin, having loose textured hair, having tight textured hair, I cannot control that. So I've noticed that there are a lot of women who do not have fluid identities, and they think that there is some way that you can control how people identify you. And it's like, no. And that's something that a person like Paris Milan wouldn't understand because she is unambiguous. So if you're unambiguous, you've probably never been identified as anything other than just black. But women who have fluid identities, we get this all the time. There are some people who view us as just black. Some people will give us nicknames such as light-skinned black or the Ethiopian. Like if you're not Ethiopian, people may mistake us for different nationalities and ethnicities. So that's also not a diss. We hop in and out of blackness all the time. And this is partially because people in the unambiguous black community push us in and out of blackness, just like how Paris Milan did in her stream about this girl that I've never heard of until today. Anyway, what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.